The president, on the advice of somebody in the White House, and I hope I find out the name of that person, also pardoned criminals who injured police officers, who destroyed this building. Is there anybody listening to me today, all 30 of them that are listening? Is there anybody here, if you had that happen to your office or your business, would you think, well, they were just a little hot-headed, let them go, not prosecute them? Or would you hold them accountable for destroying the citadel of democracy? I look to my Republican colleagues and say, don't take the bait. People that harm police officers and destroy federal buildings should go to prison. And it's a damn shame they're out, because nearly 36 of them have actually been arrested for another crime since they were pardoned. I support President Trump. I campaigned for President Trump. I would support him again if he ran for re-election, which is not going to happen. However, we acted on bad advice. We let bad people go, and we sent the message that if you come to this Capitol and you've got the right president in office, he's going to let you get past things that would not any one of us would get away with if we did it back in our home state.
Well, it's very obvious, but it's good to hear that from Republican Senator Thom Tillis on the Senate floor. It was so deeply offensive what the White House put on their website yesterday. So deeply offensive what they said about Mike Pence. Mike Pence, a man who, make no mistake, if you're watching in the White House right now, make no mistake. If you're a Republican watching on Capitol Hill, make no mistake. Mike Pence will be remembered as a man who stood in the breach and did what was necessary to follow and protect the United States Constitution. Also, make no mistake that those thugs that stormed Capitol Hill and beat the shit out of police officers, responsible, their families say, for the death of 4 cops who were serving on the Hill that day. All they were doing, protecting America's Capitol. Make no mistake, those people beating those cops will be remembered in history as traitors. They will. Not me saying that. That's just obvious. They will be remembered as January 6's Benedict Arnolds, the people trying to overthrow the government and beating the shit out of cops who were only trying to protect Republicans and Democrats and the People's House on that day. And so I don't know who thinks they get away with this. I don't know who thinks they escape history's judgment on this, but you will not escape history's judgment, and it will be harsh.
Joining the conversation, we have MS Now contributor Mike Barnicle, Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman of New York. He serves on the House Judiciary and Homeland Security Committees. Good to have you with us today.
And by the way, don't take my word for it. Let's see what Marco Rubio says about what happened on January the 6th.
Yeah, he had a pretty good reaction to it.
Yeah. We had police officers, the men and women that we walk by every single day that guard the doors and we say hello to, out there with riot gear, getting spit on and attacked. Today, not 10 weeks ago, just a few hours ago, my entire life, I have lived with and next to people who came to America because their country was chaotic and their country was unsafe. What I saw today, what we have seen, looks more like those countries than the extraordinary nation that I am privileged to call home.
And the Secretary of State's words back when he was a United States Senator seem to resonate even more today when we look at Venezuela, when we look at dictators in Cuba, when we look at the very people that he says, rightly, are illegitimate leaders. These words resonate, and they resonate so much, I think we should hear them again. TJ?
We had police officers, the men and women that we walk by every single day that guard the doors and we say hello to, out there with riot gear, getting spit on and attacked. Today, not 10 weeks ago, just a few hours ago, my entire life, I have lived with and next to people who came to America because their country was chaotic and their country was unsafe. What I saw today, what we have seen, looks more like those countries than the extraordinary nation that I am privileged to call home.
You're so right, Willie. You're so right.
He is, and it's an obvious point that was obvious to all Republicans on that day. We remember Senator Lindsey Graham's rousing speech on the floor of the Senate that day where he said, "I'm done with Trump, I'm out, it's over," until he put his finger in the wind and realized that some Trump supporters liked what they saw on TV that day and backed away and circled the wagons around Donald Trump. This website that they put up, riddled with lies. John wrote an entire book about the big lie. These were judges that, many of them appointed by Donald Trump, that shot down every challenge to this election. They all said the election was not stolen. The people who attacked the Capitol and beat up police officers called on the White House website patriotic citizens who'd been persecuted by a weaponized DOJ. Almost 200 of them actually pled guilty to assaulting the officers. They know that they were wrong and they were convicted of those crimes before Donald Trump pardoned them. So just appalling, disgusting lies. And as you say, the good news is Americans watch this happen with their own two eyes. The vast majority of Americans know that January 6th was a dark and terrible day for the country.
I will say the vast majority of Republicans, though, do not. The vast majority of Republicans who, on this day, were as deeply offended as everybody else, as a family of the police officers who were beaten and brutalized by this savage mob. Most people still live with the pain and the misery that these people caused them and their fathers, their sons, their daughters, who only served on Capitol Hill to protect members of Congress. And here's a picture of Brian Sicknick. He was the officer that was beaten and brutalized. There were other law enforcement officers who were brutalized by violent thugs on that day for them just bravely protecting America's capital. You know, the fact is, good Americans don't whitewash mob violence. They really don't. If you're sitting there and you're still trying to whitewash what happened on January 6th, you're not a good American. You're really not, because you can't be a good American if you turn a blind eye to what happened on January 6th and you believe all the conspiracy theories and the lies that even this Trump FBI has proven were lies and conspiracy theories. And I saw Ed Whelan, a conservative's conservative, last night saying, if you were offended by what happened on January 6th, but you're not offended now by what happened on January 6th, congratulations, you've just gaslit yourself. And to show the contrast, let's look at Marco Rubio again. And this really does personify what's happened to so much of the Republican Party. People who saw with their own eyes what happened on that day and were rightly offended, who were deeply offended before undergoing some conversion to suggest that it was made up by the media. Watch it.
We had police officers, the men and women that we walk by every single day that guard the doors and we say hello to, out there with riot gear, getting spit on and attacked. Today, not 10 weeks ago, just a few hours ago, my entire life, I have lived with and next to people who came to America because their country was chaotic and their country was unsafe. What I saw today, what we have seen, looks more like those countries than the extraordinary nation that I am privileged to call home.
I hate it to end this way. Oh, my God, I hate it. From my point of view, he's been a consequential president. But today, first thing you'll see, all I can say is count me out. Enough is enough.
Really?
And that lasted for about 48 hours until he went to Reagan National and was harassed by some Trump supporters.
Yeah,
Really
about
changed his mind.
five Trump supporters and a hound dog barking at him.
Finger in the wind. So, Congressman, just your thoughts around this 5th anniversary of January 6th yesterday, and really this transformation when you now have the official White House page rewriting history and just telling a slew of lies about that day.
The thing that really jumped out to me when you watched Senator Tillis on the floor is that behind him he had the plaque to honor the police officers, to honor the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police Department officers who saved the Capitol that day and suffered so much damage. The reason he had that plaque there is that 5 years later, the Republicans still will not hang that plaque in the Capitol.
Why not?
Because it would be upset Donald Trump.
They don't want to honor cops?
That's correct. That plaque.
Why do they hate cops?
I don't know. Why?
I don't understand. Why do they hate cops who were doing their job protecting the people's house, protecting their lives? Why do they hate the very police officers who saved their lives on that day?
And let me add something to that. Yesterday, there was a march of some of the worst of the January 6 criminals, people who were convicted, put in jail for seditious conspiracy, one guy for assaulting 8 different officers. They actually marched back from the Ellipse to the Capitol, and they gathered.
Wait. Did you say one guy beat up 8 cops?
Yes.
One guy beat up 8 cops. One guy beat up 8 cops, and he got pardoned.
Correct.
And had the nerve to show his face in public. Beat up 8 cops.
The ringleader, Enrico Tarrio, led a big group of some of the worst of these people who abuse the cops. They go to the Capitol and they confront the same Capitol police officers who they beat 5 years ago, who are there still protecting the Capitol.
Do you know how many people, Congressman, said that these people should never be pardoned, including J.D. Vance? I mean, I think I saw a clip of Charlie Kirk saying in real time, these people should face the full consequences. And now they're marching in public, proud that they beat the shit out of cops. I want to know why Republicans in the Senate hate cops so much that they will not honor these cops whose families say they lost their lives because of those because of those thugs in that mob. I don't mean.
You saw the mob.
I don't mean to be naive here. I really don't. But I don't know how this could happen in America, that cops are beaten up. And you have Republicans on Capitol Hill afraid to honor those law enforcement officers?
They're afraid of one thing, and one thing only, and that is Donald Trump.
Well, they didn't bow to him, John, on the filibuster. They didn't bow to him on the blue slips. Why in the world would they bow to him on honoring police officers? I want to know why they hate Capitol Hill cops so much that they won't even. I was there. I see what the Capitol Hill cops do every day. We sure saw what they did that day. Why won't they put a plaque up to honor the law enforcement officers, let me say it again, who saved their lives on that day, and allow them to go home and be with their wives or husbands and children and live? Why won't they honor those cops?
The whitewashing and rewriting the history of January 6th has become so central to Trump's Republican Party. It would be a further defiance than actually standing up to him on something like blue slips. This is inherent. He still, this weekend, the president still says the 2020 election was stolen.
No evidence. And by the way,
none.
Just for the record, if people are there too stupid to really, I don't know, read, let me help you out. 63 federal judges said all of the claims about stolen elections were bullshit. 63 federal judges, and so many of those were appointed by Donald Trump. The Supreme Court said those claims were bullshit, including Alito and Thomas in the Pennsylvania case, who said, yes, we have trouble with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court doing some things. But even if they had done it the right way, that would not have changed the outcome of the election. See, this is what you just can't argue with the facts. Those are the facts. You can live in a fantasy, but again, your lies, your stupid lies about conspiracy theories, they've all been blown to pieces. And the theory about the pipe bomb guy, blown to bits by the FBI. Not by not by the New York Times editorial page. Not by prime time of MS Now. Trump's FBI said your conspiracy theories were bullshit. And you still want to live in this lie at the expense of honoring cops who lost their lives as a result of that day, according to all of their families. Mike, you know a thing or two about Capitol Hill cops.
Yeah.
These people are extraordinary. Risk their lives every day, and especially on that day.
Yes.
And they risk their lives to save the lives of the very Republicans now who are ashamed to honor their duty and service and sacrifice to America. Where are these Republicans? Why won't they stand up for the law enforcement officers who stood up to an angry mob who tried to overthrow democracy? Where are these Republicans?
They're hiding in fear of, as you pointed out, Donald J. Trump. They're hiding. And my question to you, Dan, is, you're a member of Congress. How often do you sit there wondering, where are we now as a nation that we can't hang a plaque in the Capitol honoring the police officers? Some of them gave their lives protecting people like you, members of the House of Representatives, on that day, January 6th. Where are we now that the White House issues an official statement filled with lies about January 6th, about what happened on January 6th, a fantasy under the signature of the White House yesterday? Yeah. It was incredible to read that.
I don't know how most, if not all, of my Republican colleagues wake up in the morning and look themselves in the mirror. Why do you take a job to travel across the country away from your family, and you're in the majority of the Congress where you can really enact legislation, you can push forward your agenda, you uphold the Constitution, to completely roll over to someone they all know is full of it? They all know what happened on January 6th. Half of them said it on the floor of the Senate and the House at the time. And they all know. And they sit there silently, refusing to even put up a plaque to honor the Capitol Police Department, because John's right. This is central to the MAGA base. The MAGA base has no idea what a blue slip is. But they know that Donald Trump has whipped them up into such a frenzy about January 6th and about the 2020 election, to the point that in order to be hired in this administration, you had to say that the 2020 election was fraudulent. There was a literal litmus test to be hired in this administration, that you essentially declare your fealty to whatever Donald Trump says, regardless of whether it's true or not. Now, this happens across the board, but this January 6th, that page on the White House website, this plaque that they won't even put up to honor the 140 plus law enforcement officers who were injured that day, it encapsulates everything you need to know about what is going on in Washington and the degree to which The Republicans care so much more about their political seat, about their job in Congress, than they do about the United States, about the Constitution, about the law enforcement officers. And I don't know why they want the job. Many of the good ones are leaving, because why would you want this job and leave your family if you're just going over to roll over to lies by Donald Trump?
I've had the job, Willie, and I can tell you it's not worth betraying the memory of police officers. It's not worth betraying the memory of law enforcement officers that stood up to a violent mob to save their lives. It's not worth it.
Of the many ways, big and small, that Republicans have bent their knee to Donald Trump and looked the other way for some of his most appalling behavior, this, to many people, is the worst, because it should be the easiest to condemn. I mean, it's extraordinary cowardice, not just cowardice. You have to bend over to be this cowardly and not be able to condemn what you saw with your own eyes, what many of them experienced themselves on that day, and to go along for the ride as these lies are perpetrated again with this new website by the White House.